24-hour cycle because it's really central to what you learn in the VEEP system and how to let it work for you. And there's an amazing power that I've said in our first webinar that we that use the VEEP system have, and really through all of these webinars we want to give it to you. And it's the power to really at any given time eat what we feel like eating and still maintain our weight. And you're going to learn the core of how we do that today. And it's all tied to the body's clock and the 24-hour cycle. So then we're going to look at extending the fat burning cycles in a day and slowing the fat storage cycles. So let's jump into it. So the first thing to understand is that your body has a clock. It's got a series of clocks, and it is synced to the Earth's natural light and dark cycle. And you have a master clock in your brain, and it is triggered by pulses of light and dark. And then each of the various organs in your bodies have their own independent clocks that sync with that master clock. And then each cell has a clock. And it's really fascinating to look at this and think about it. It's literally a molecular oscillator that ticks, and it ticks through the seconds of 24 hours. And all those clocks sync back to your body's master clock. So all that to say, one of the problems that we have in the modern era, the modern ecosystem, is that we've lost darkness. We don't have something our ancestors had, and this is fundamental, absolutely fundamental to controlling your weight over a lifetime. I'm not going to get scientific, but I'm just going to get right to the chase and tell you how to deal with this. So the problem is called light pollution. And the problem is that 80% of the population in industrialized societies never actually sees the pure night sky, never actually sees complete darkness at night. And in the research, there's a one-to-one correlation between exposure to artificial light and obesity and metabolic dysmetabolism. And it's all tied to exposure to lights at night, exposure to artificial light and EMF from things like cell phones, laptops, all these different sources of light. And it's very simple to understand. All mammals, every mammal on this planet has a little switch in their brain that has learned to sync up to the Earth's natural cycle. And it's activated by light and dark because that's how the Earth's 24-hour cycle works. It works in cycles of light and dark. And so our bodies have a clocking system that's synced to it. And when that clocking system gets out of sync with the Earth's natural cycle, we get fat and we get sick. It's really that simple. And the really amazing news is that this is incredibly easy to fix. And these are, once again, in the category of bang for the buck solutions that take no time, take no energy, and have massive, massive impact. So really the first thing to think about is that we want to restore 8 hours of pure darkness every night into your sleep cycle. Now there's a number of ways you can do this. Obviously, you can look at just something over your eyes. You can look at blacking out your rooms. Now in conjunction with this, we need to think about exposure to artificial light and the difference between that and sundown. So when the sun goes down and the artificial light goes out, the more time we spend in artificial light, the more likely we are to be overweight. So there's just there's kind of a simple one-to-one there, minimizing our hours in that. There's also new types of light available, new types of light bulbs that that mimic the natural lighting cycle of the Earth, some things we can look at. One of the really important things in conjunction with restoring 8 hours of pure darkness is to really look at your vitamin D intake. And these two go hand in hand. So what we're doing here is we're restoring what's been lost in the last 100 years. What's been lost in the last 100 years is adequate levels of vitamin D, and together with that, pure darkness. Now those two things together are incredibly powerful. We're talking about hormone cascades that control almost everything. So increasing your vitamin D intake. Now what I suggest for most of you, if you have the ability, is to get serum vitamin D levels measured. That might be something the Y can facilitate or make available. Most of us are in the 20s, 25, 30, and really the ideal range optimally is getting vitamin D levels well over 50. Mine are currently in the 70s, and I try and keep them there year-round. The next thing is to eliminate exposure to any kind of electromagnetic frequency while you're sleeping. So get your laptops, get your cell phones, get those night lights, get all that stuff out of the room. Just get it out of the room. So now just think about this for a second. The environment our ancestors were in was an environment that had a few key gene activators, three principally, or rather three things that made it stand out. One of them was regular exposure to sunlight and vitamin D production. Number two was regular exposure to total darkness at night. Number three was little to no EMF, electromagnetic frequency. Now think about the environment we live in. We live in an environment where there's very little to highly inadequate vitamin D due to lack of sun exposure, almost no pure darkness at all, and massive levels of EMF surrounding us all the time. So when we look at causes of obesity and metabolic dysmetabolism and cancer, you're staring right at it right here, one of the principal reasons. And it's just our bodies have thousands of years of programming to deal with vitamin D levels and pure darkness and no EMF, and we've completely disrupted that. So this is very simple, very easy, very powerful things you can do starting tonight. It'll have a dramatic, massive effect on your body. Make sure you get pure blackness for 8 hours. Make sure that you get your vitamin D levels really up above 50. And then get all of the light stimulators, the artificial light stimulators, out. Now, when I say pure blackness at night, many of us either live in cities where we're exposed to light coming through the windows at night, or we have, we get up in the middle of the night and we've got all these night lights and all this stuff on. The thing you need to understand is that your body's clock is synced to pulses of light. So a single pulse of light in the middle of the night can reset the body's clock. Just think about that. Now, our ancestors didn't have that. If they got up in the middle of the night, it was still black. So my point here is the simplest, easiest thing you can do is just restore 8 hours of pure darkness, okay? And really the takeaway from that is the clock runs everything. Everything controlled by the clock, okay? We cannot define metabolism apart from the body clock. And we're going to look at one key idea that's central to the VEEP system here, and we're going to really dive into this. The idea is that in any given day, you're always burning fat and storing fat, and it happens multiple times in a day. Now, once you get this idea, and once you understand how to master this idea, you are going to experience a freedom you didn't think was possible. You're going to experience the freedom to kind of eat what you feel like eating if you feel like eating something at any given time. And by leveraging this idea, it doesn't affect you. You don't gain weight. And you're just leveraging the idea that you're going to be storing fat multiple times in a day anyway. So let me prove this to you, though, because there might be some doubters in the audience. So let's just think about this for a second. So I want to give you 3 examples, and just think about it. So example 1 is that starting today, you ate regularly, and then tomorrow you didn't eat at all until 8 p.m. at night, and then you ate all your calories at 8 p.m. Okay? So for that day, ask yourself, would you have a long period that day of burning fat? And what do you think the answer is? Most of you are answering yes. Yeah, if you didn't eat till 8, you'd be burning fat all the way up till 8, a good chunk of the day. And then after 8, let me ask you this. Now, would you have a long period of storing fat? Yes, the answer is yes. You ate all your calories at 8 o'clock, you'd be storing fat for several hours. So here's just a simple example where you can see that you'd have, your day would be split up. You'd have a good chunk of time burning fat, good chunk of time storing fat, but it would all even out. Let's look at another example. The following day, you ate all your calories at lunch, and then you didn't eat again until lunch the following day. So now the question again is, in that 24 hours, would there be a long period of fat burning if you ate all your calories at lunch? The answer is yes. Same thing. You'd store fat for several hours if you ate all your calories at lunch, probably 5, 6, 7 hours, but then you'd have a long period of burning fat. Now let's break this up a little bit. Now let's, there's a slide that's missing here. Let's take an example now where you ate 50% of your calories at breakfast. Half your calories for the day you ate at breakfast. So it's fair to say you're going to store some fat for several hours after that. However, let's assume that your next meal wasn't until 3 o'clock. So from 8 to 3, you had this very long stretch, 7 hours, where at 3 o'clock you eat 25% of your calories, and then you don't eat your next meal until 10 o'clock that night, and you eat another 25% of your calories. So now let me ask you folks this. Is it fair to say that in that stretch that you're having multiple periods where there's fat being stored and fat burnt? What do you think? Your answer is yes. So yeah, you eat 50% of your calories at 8 a.m. in the morning, and then you went 7 hours before you ate again. And so as a result of that, the closer we get to 3 o'clock, the farther we get from 8, the more likely you are to burn fat. And then after 3, you're going to store some fat, probably for a few hours because it's a big meal. But then as you go, 7, 8, 9 at night, you're going to probably burn fat. So here's my point. We can store fat and we can burn fat multiple times in a day. And one of the key variables that affects that is just the size of the meal and the length of time between meals. Okay? So if we treat those both as dials on a knob, so the size of the meal is one dial and the time between meals is another dial, and as we tweak both knobs, we can affect fat burning and fat storage. So this is the basic pattern that all VEEP rests on, and it rests on the idea that at any given time, there's really 3 meals you're dealing with. There's always your current meal, and that meal is always dictated by the previous meal and the next meal. Now, if you notice the little dots coming in to your current meal, you notice they start changing color and then getting red. And what that represents is the span of time that goes by between my current meal and my next meal. The longer that span of time is, the closer I get to burning fat to my next meal. Now, this idea forms the basis of eating in 24-hour cycles, because once we take it for fact that we can burn fat and store fat multiple times in a day, then what's in this current meal, if I happen to store fat, it's not the end of the world, is it? Because we know that we can burn fat. We can turn the dials on the knobs. Now, there's two ideas here. So one of the keys in VEEP is that we learn how to burn fat longer. If we're burning fat and storing fat in a day, then if we can learn to burn fat longer and then we can learn to store fat less, then we have tremendous freedom. So what I want to do is I want to walk you through one of the things that we do in VEEP to burn fat longer. And there's a number of things in VEEP, and that's why we have VEEP University, but I'm going to take one of them right now. So ways that we can burn fat longer is through the way we combine foods can greatly affect how we burn fat. The macro ratios that are on the plate can affect that. Obviously, the timing between meals can affect that. And as we learned last week, the microbiome can affect that. The microbiome affects both fat burning and energy harvest, how much calories we take in. So the idea that a calorie is a calorie is not really accurate. How much energy we get from food is highly dependent on the type of bacteria in our gut. So we can take in a lot of calories, but don't actually use it for energy depending on the bacteria in our gut. But let's take a look at one example here, and I'm going to show you the VEEP program here. Let me get into Monday morning, and let me show you one example of how we can extend fat burning. So here's a meal that you see in VEEP. It's a whey protein Greek yogurt meal. Now, notice with this meal, there's a number of things that we're taking. We're taking the way the combinations are, the foods are combined. We're taking the macro ratios. We're taking the timing, and even the gut microbiome. So what we're affecting with this meal here is we're affecting calcium flux, which affects fat burning. We're affecting insulin function. We're affecting serotonin. We're affecting fullness. And look at the timing. So here we see an example of extending fat burning, where you have a meal designed to help you burn fat, and the timing between the meals is really what helps us here. So all these things work together. So notice we have a full 3.5 hours here before we eat again. Now, one of the things you're going to learn in VEEP is that time between meals is one of the most powerful tools you have. So notice lunch here is at 1 and then your snacks at 5. It's really important that a couple times a day you have those good 3.5, 4, even 5-hour stretches between your next meal. Because it's in that last hour and a half, where the body hops back into fat burning. But learning to extend fat burning through using foods is one of the ways that we take advantage of this 24-hour cycle. And you can think of meals like this as things functionally. All these things are working for us here. The macro ratios, the way the foods are combined, the time between meals, even the effect on the gut microbiota through fermentation in the yogurt. All these things work for us. So this is one tool that we have that we can use as a meal to soup up fat burning. So coming back to this idea here, think about this. So if my previous meal was what you just saw, and I let 3.5, 4 hours go by, now as I get to my current meal, I have some options. I can obviously eat something that's very fat burning aggressive, but since I know that I can store fat and burn fat in a day, if I just happen to maybe eat a hamburger and some fries, I don't really have to worry about it, because I'm equipping myself with tools so that at my next meal, I'm going to burn fat again. So if I burn fat at my previous meal, gain fat here, burn fat here, it kind of all evens out. So this is the beginning of beginning to understand how you can free yourself from sort of restricted dieting and thinking that you got to just leave everything off, is using your body's natural cycle of storing fat and burning fat. Now let's take a look at how we store less fat. So there's kind of 3 tools we have. There's the way we combine foods, there's changing the way the body uses insulin, and then there's a tool in VEEP you learn called preloads. And so what I want to do is I want to take a look at one of these, just one of the tool sets that we can use to store less fat. So in VEEP, there is a lesson, it's the very first lesson you learn, on how to use fats and carbs to keep from storing fat. It's a super simple idea. Basically, the idea is simply that when you have carbs, you have a very small amount of fat with those carbs. And what that does, that the simple act of doing that is it slows how fast sugars empty from the gut. Once again, timing is everything. The rate at which sugar hits your blood is everything. The length of time between meals is everything. So if we can make food go into the gut slower, then we're going to tend to store less fat because not as much sugar is hitting the body as fast. The other effect this has is that there's hormones that help insulin do its job. They have big long names like GLP-1 and GIP and incretins and all that. But just know that the way we combine foods stimulates hormones here to help insulin do its thing. So just this simple act that you learn in the very first lesson helps to store less fat. So coming back to this idea here, if we can store fat and burn fat multiple times in a day, then if we learn how to burn more fat and store less fat all in the same day, just through these tools that you're learning here, then when we get to that current meal is always a floating proposition. We always have the option of, if I feel like eating pasta and, a glass of wine and all that, suddenly the old way of thinking collapses. The old, I can't because it's a carb and I can't because it's this. Well, that goes away because you're being equipped with tools, specific meals, learning timing, learning all these things that help you offset this meal. So that's the thing that we really wanted to convey today, was that in the 24-hour cycle, you have multiple periods where you store fat, you burn fat, and that 24-hour cycle dictates everything. Now, one last thing that we want to convey here is that fats play a very key role in the body's 24-hour cycle. And one of the reasons that you see that pattern we've already looked at a little bit, which is the Tuesday-Thursday pattern, one of the reasons you see in this pattern the use of fats is that fats act as a trigger to reset the body's clocks. So fat pulses in the evening and morning actually help the body reset its clock. And so one of the problems that you see when we have weight problems is that our body clocks are out of sync with food patterns. So what we've done here is we've given you 2-3 times a week where in the morning you're having fat. And those regular pulses of fat help reset the body clock, help resync the body's clock. That's why that's another reason why they're so important. So that's it for this week's seminar. We want to turn it over to Q&A now. And any questions that you have, I'll let Marco take over.
So we've got one question in already, and it is that a lot of the studies on EMF are not scientifically weak. So do you have any well-regarded or scientific publications that support the research shared at the front end? And if you don't have them at your hands, we can send them out afterwards.
Yeah. When you say support EMF, well, a couple questions. So I think there's pretty clear evidence that that we got two different things here. We have light and dark, and then we have EMF, and how those things contribute to obesity. So I don't know that I would agree with that blanket statement. There's quite a bit of research that strongly suggests that there's a very strong correlation with EMF and dysregulation of metabolism. And I'm happy to compile stuff and send it out. With respect to light and dark, I don't think there's any question about that. That's beyond sort of, yeah, that's like kind of bulletproof. But yeah, so happy to compile stuff and get it out. And if you want to, we can sidebar, or we could even do a whole seminar on it if you want to.
Sarah, if you could grab maybe their contact information, we could, maybe send them some research to dig into.
Sure.
Okay.
All right. So Andreas, we'll follow up with you. How do we determine how long to wait before our next meal based on the last meal we ate?
So again, coming back to the idea that there's a couple variables that affect that, you have to think of it in terms of there's two knobs. There's your principal knob is the size of the previous meal, and then the time between the next meal. So as we dial down the size of that previous meal, and then begin to dial up a little bit the time between meals, you're going to see that the body starts to take itself into trying to get its blood sugar up faster. But there's limits here. If we take this down too low and this too far, then the body won't burn fat. So these are really like knobs, and everybody's different. There's not a hard and fast rule, but generally what we've built into the program is giving yourself a good 3.5 to 4.5 hours between a major meal to allow the body to burn fat. And I can just tell you kind of anecdotally, when you're giving up the body, when you have a decent sized lunch like this, where there's a number of sort of functional foods that are working for you here, if you'll let this go, till 3, 4, 5 hours, in those last 2-3 hours, you really feel it.
Great. A question is, can you repeat the same meals from the plan day to day? So basically eating the same thing each day.
Yes, yes and no. A lot of people like to do that. Let me throw out a couple caveats to that. You certainly can kind of have some homogeneity between like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then Tuesday, Thursday. You can kind of do the same things in those days. Some things to be aware of. You'll see sort of oddball things in the program. Like you'll see randomly like a giant breakfast. Here's about 1,000 calories for me. These are breaks against the things that happen when you diet. So when you diet and you don't experience regular stomach distension, you're affecting a hormonal control point. And so we like to give a nod to that every now and then. You'll see this on certain days, like Wednesday, Sunday morning. You'll see these very large breakfasts. So you don't want to get away from those. Those are very helpful long term. And then you'll see some variance with foods day in and day out for different reasons. Like you'll notice that some days maybe that things lean a little bit more towards what you would call fibrous carbohydrates. Like on a Monday, you'll see a lot of beans, you'll see a lot of stuff like that. And we're really targeting production of butyrate in the gut. But then other days, like a Wednesday or a Friday, you'll see things where we're leaning a little bit more towards proteins, a little bit more towards helping the body build muscle, and that's because you want to have a balance between a couple of different key pathways in the body. And so, yes, you can do that, but also would encourage you to, vary it up here and there. Let the program kind of put some variety into things.
Well, the easiest way to probably answer that question is to just start immersing yourself into the program. Seeing what foods are available, noticing for any particular meal in the system. When you press that a la carte button, it's going to show you the exact macros that we kind of funnel you into having for those particular meals. So we get a lot of feedback from the perspective of your exact question, which is after a couple weeks, people start getting into the habits of the patterns in the system. So don't get overwhelmed at first. You have full flexibility to substitute foods, eat the foods you want to eat. That's a pivotal part of the program. But over time, you'll kind of get into your rhythm to where even if you don't have time to log in, you know that this particular meal is a go-to meal at that particular time.
Great. The next question is, could you elaborate on resetting the clock with fat? What fats? Is it fats from avocado and almonds versus fats from burger and fries? Is there a difference?
Well, yes, there's always, that's a very complex question. Yeah. So, long story short, the body's primary clock is it's a cluster of neurons in the brain called the SCN, suprachiasmatic nucleus, and pulses of fat greatly affect the way that clock interacts with a few key processes in the body. So there's a couple ways you can do this. You can look at fats if you're in a phase of building muscle, and that's kind of your focus, you can look at fats in the evening. If you're in a phase when you really want to burn fat, you can look at fats in the morning on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and that's the simplest way to kind of break it down for you. And yes, the healthier fats are obviously better.
Great. And these two questions kind of go hand in hand. So one is, how does eating 1 to 2 hours before sleeping affect fat burning? And the other was, how beneficial is it not to eat carbs after 6 or 7 p.m.?
Yeah, I'm sorry, could you repeat the very first question?
How does eating 1 to 2 hours before sleeping affect fat burning?
So yeah, really good question. So the answer, the first question has to, the first idea has to do with the presence of fat in that meal. So the presence of fat in that meal affects a number of things. If there's fat in that meal, you're going to stimulate you're going to be more inclined to stimulate a pathway that's a growth pathway. It's called the mTOR pathway. And the body, it's essentially a switch that needs to be turned on in order to grow. And presence of fat works in conjunction with the body's clock and the mTOR pathway to help that. Also helps stimulate hormones while you're sleeping that are going to help you do that. If you take away fat at night and you're leaning more towards what we talked about last week, like the fibrous vegetables, then you're looking more at sort of emphasizing different pathways while you're sleeping that lend more out to burning fat.
Great. And David's asking, he joined the webinar late, so David, we will be sending out a recording of the webinar tomorrow. You'll get it in your follow-up email so you can hear the beginning. And then Laura's asking, is this primary helpful for people who are utilizing VEEP, or how does anybody use it?
Well, certainly anybody can utilize the information that we're giving here. Obviously, as you're starting to get a taste for that, this is not really dieting. Like, I'm not giving you, a meal plan saying just eat this and lose weight. What we're giving you are a different set of ideas and then tools that you can use to have a ton of flexibility with what you're doing. And the best way to present that is the program, because it just takes time to learn it all. Like, you're going through all these lessons and learning all these things in here. So I hope that answers it. Did I answer it all, or maybe I missed part of that?
We obviously highly encourage, for everyone on this webinar to take advantage of the technology that's being made available to you by the YMCA. These webinars are more foundational to kind of set the platform for, pretty much what we're proposing in the technology. We like to take a lot of the science that's in the program and then just kind of extrapolate those into formal lessons. But I would say that you'd be doing yourself kind of a disservice if you certainly don't take advantage of the technology. And we hope that by doing these lessons, we can kind of provoke the fact that regardless of what you're essentially trying to learn at the end of the day, whether it's weight loss, whether it's more weight control, this technology goes far beyond dieting. It's all about long-term weight control, and that's what the program does. So obviously from a biased perspective, we certainly want you to take advantage of it, but you're only going to really immerse yourself by signing up for the program for sure.
And Laura's asking if recordings from last week's webinars are available, and they are, Laura. In the follow-up email that goes out, you'll get our YouTube link, and it has all the webinars recordings on it. I think we've covered all the questions. We'll give everyone just a minute if there's any questions we haven't covered to type it in. Otherwise, if you could take the time to vote on a 1 to 10 scale on how helpful the content of today's webinar was, and we'll look at offering more of these. We do have one more webinar next week as well. Do you have any other questions pop up? So next week's webinar, we'll be talking about listening to food signals. So rather than tracking all your calories, how to read the signals of the food you eat and plan your meals accordingly. Looks like we don't have any other questions coming in. Marco and Joel, do you have anything to close us out?
No. Hopefully everyone can submit their vote on a scale to 0 to 10. This is a really important part for us because we like to put a lot of effort into these webinars, and we hope that we're serving you the best we can. So if you don't mind in the chat box submitting a 0 to a 10 on how valuable and helpful this information was moving forward. And Joel, do you have anything else?
Well, so we're at our third webinar, folks, and we've covered some really interesting stuff so far. Apart from all that stuff, so there's a side of things where what we're trying to do here is just equip you with really what we call tool sets that are hopefully non-time energy intensive, that create radical impact on your life. But apart from that, we really want to be available to assist your success in any way. And so we just encourage everybody here, feel free to email us in with your support questions, and we really want to hear your stories. This is a journey that you're on, and we want to help you. We just want to help you make radical change in this journey. So we'd love to hear from you, and that really is kind of what I'll leave you with.
All right. Thank you for your time, and we hope to see you next week.
All right. Thanks, everybody.